At my mom's birthday dinner, my brother smirked and called me useless, saying I couldn't even afford bread. My parents stayed silent. What they didn't know, I had proof they'd stolen $50,000 in my name. 1 week later, he was begging, and I sent just 3 words. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in a modest 3-bedroom house on a quiet street where neighbors waved and kids rode bikes until dark. From the outside, we looked like a stable, middle-class family. But inside, things weren't so simple. My dad lost his warehouse manager job when I was 15, and my mom's part-time receptionist gig wasn't enough to keep us afloat. Bills piled up, the fridge sat half empty, and the stress in the air was thick enough to choke on. At 17, I'd picked up a job at a small tech company downtown, fixing printers and resetting passwords for $10 an hour. Half my paycheck went straight to my parents to help with groceries and bills. They thanked me, sure, but it never felt optional, it was expected. While I worked late shifts and skipped meals, my older brother Ryan was treated like royalty. Ryan was the golden child, confident, charismatic, and endlessly praised. He could do no wrong. My parents funneled every spare dollar into his dreams of running a fitness app startup. They bought him a car, paid for his office space, and cheered at every one of his so-called investor meetings. Meanwhile, my achievements, straight A's, teaching myself to code on an old laptop, went unnoticed. Whenever I hinted at wanting to pursue tech more seriously, Dad laughed it off. "Coding isn't for girls," he'd sneer. Mom wasn't any better. She'd cut me down with comparisons. "Why can't you be more like Ryan? He's going places." Each jab chipped away at me, but I swallowed my frustration. I started keeping track of every dollar I gave them in a little app I built myself. At first, it was just a habit, something to make me feel organized. But deep down, I knew I'd need those records one day. Family dinners were the hardest. Ryan's latest pitch or flashy Instagram post always took center stage while I sat quietly, ignored. Once I even showed Mom a budgeting app I'd coded to help track expenses. She glanced at it for 2 seconds before brushing it off. "That's nice," she said flatly, then immediately pivoted to Ryan's world-changing business. My stomach dropped, but I forced a smile. That was the pattern my hard work dismissed, his failures disguised as brilliance. I wasn't just overlooked. I was invisible. But as invisible as they made me feel, I had something they didn't. I had grit. I worked, saved, and learned in silence, building a life they couldn't touch. I may have been the overlooked one, but I was also the one they underestimated. And one day, that mistake would cost them everything. While my family poured all their time and money into Ryan's genius startup, I built in silence. I didn't have investors, a shiny car, or parents bragging about me at dinner tables. What I had was an old, beat-up laptop and a stubborn determination to prove I wasn't useless. Every night after work, I'd come home exhausted, but instead of collapsing into bed, I opened my laptop. Free online coding tutorials became my escape. I learned Python, JavaScript, SQL slowly at first, but steadily. I'd practice by creating small apps for myself, a task tracker to manage my shifts, a budgeting calculator, even a little tool that broke down my monthly spending. Each project was a brick in the wall I was building between me and my family's expectations. And speaking of money, I guarded mine like it was gold. I lived in a tiny shared apartment, $8 ramen, wore thrift store clothes, and kept every extra penny in a separate savings account my parents didn't know about. Meanwhile, I still handed over family contributions when they asked, hundreds here, thousands there. But I logged every cent into the budgeting app I'd built. Every payment had a date, an amount, and a note. I didn't know why I was so meticulous, but a part of me sensed I'd need proof one day. Ryan, of course, lived like a king. His Instagram was full of leased cars, photos in expensive coffee shops, and captions like "crushing it" or "entrepreneur life." His friends called him a trailblazer. My parents beamed whenever they talked about him. But I knew the truth. Through whispers from mutual contacts, I found out his empire was crumbling. He was drowning in debt, defaulting on vendor payments, scrambling to keep up appearances. His office was rented, his car financed to the hilt, his big deals smoke and mirrors. I stayed silent, let them believe his lies. I wasn't going to be the one to burst their bubble, not yet. Instead, I kept coding, kept saving, kept building. At the startup where I worked, my persistence started paying off. I moved from basic IT support to helping developers debug backend scripts. They saw my drive, and little by little, I earned more responsibility. By the time I graduated college, I had a full-time programmer role waiting for me, paying $60,000 a year. It was the kind of job that could change everything. But I didn't tell my family. To them, I was still the struggling daughter they could guilt into handing over money. And honestly, I let them believe it. The less they knew, the safer my future was. By then, I'd given them $5,000 toward the mortgage, $2,000 for car repairs, $400 for utilities, and countless little emergencies. I had the records for every transfer, neatly logged. It wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof of how much they'd leaned on me while pretending I was worthless. But here's the thing, being overlooked became my greatest weapon. While Ryan shouted about his fake success from rooftops, I moved in silence. While my parents dismissed my dreams, I turned them into skills. Every late night coding, every dollar I stashed away, every record I kept, it all built toward one inevitable truth. They thought I'd always be their safety net. They thought I'd always stay small, quiet, invisible. But I wasn't building for them. I was building for me. And the day they finally pushed me too far, I was ready to burn the whole illusion down. Mom's birthday was supposed to be a celebration, but it felt more like a performance. We met at a family-style Italian restaurant in Albuquerque. The kind with checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic bread drifting through the air. The table was crowded with pasta and wine, but the mood was strained. Ryan, of course, dominated the night. He talked loudly about his latest investor pitch, swirling his glass of Merlot like he was some Wall Street mogul. Mom laughed at his every joke. Dad nodded along like a proud coach, and I sat there quietly, twirling spaghetti around my fork, trying not to roll my eyes. Halfway through the meal, Ryan turned his smirk toward me. His voice cut through the chatter like a knife. So, sis, still stuck at that dead-end tech job? Can you even afford your meal tonight? The table went silent. He leaned back, smug, then dropped the line that burned into my memory forever. Useless. You can't even afford a piece of bread. For a second, no one breathed. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks, the heat of humiliation crawling up my neck. I glanced at my parents, desperate for something, a defense. A word. A look. Anything. But Mom kept her eyes on her plate, pushing a meatball around with her fork. Dad cleared his throat and took a long sip of water. Neither of them said a thing. Their silence was worse than Ryan's insult. It wasn't just that they didn't defend me, it was that they agreed. I forced a smile, stood up, and excused myself. My chair scraped against the tile floor as I walked out into the cool night air. My hands trembled as I gripped my car keys, replaying Ryan's words in my head. Useless. The word echoed, each repetition heavier than the last. I thought I was alone, but then I heard footsteps. My grandfather, quiet, reserved, always a shadow at family gatherings, followed me outside. He looked around, making sure no one else was near, then placed a hand on my shoulder. His eyes carried a heaviness I'd never seen before. Bailey, he said softly. There's something you need to know. My stomach dropped. He hesitated, as if saying it out loud would shatter something permanent. Then, with a deep sigh, he told me the truth. 2 years ago, my parents had taken out a loan $50,000, but not in their name. In mine, without my knowledge, without my consent, they had used my credit to prop up Ryan's failing company. Grandpa had overheard them whispering about it late one night. He'd kept it to himself, but after what just happened at dinner, he couldn't stay silent any longer. The words hit me harder than Ryan's insult. $50,000, my name. My future, stolen. I stood frozen in the parking lot, the sound of laughter spilling from the restaurant behind us, while my whole world tilted. My parents hadn't just dismissed me, they'd betrayed me. And Ryan, the same brother who mocked me to my face, had been living on my stolen credit. Rage boiled beneath my skin, but I swallowed it down. Not here, not yet. I wasn't going to storm back inside and scream. That would give them too much satisfaction. Instead, I nodded at Grandpa, my jaw tight, my mind already racing. They thought I was weak. They thought I was naive. They thought I'd never find out, but they were wrong. That night, as I drove home under the desert sky, Ryan's smug grin burned in my mind. My parents' silence echoed louder than words. And Grandpa's confession lit the fuse. This wasn't humiliation anymore. This was war. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment with my laptop open, the glow of the screen casting long shadows on the walls. My heart raced as I logged into my online banking, my fingers trembling with every click. And there it was. A loan account, opened 2 years ago. My name, my social security number, my future tied to a $50,000 debt I'd never seen, never approved, never even been asked about. The balance was sickening, the interest climbing higher with every month. My chest tightened. Rage, betrayal, fear, it all twisted together until I felt like I couldn't breathe. But instead of collapsing, I forced myself to act. I printed everything. Bank statements, account details, even old emails buried in my spam folder, notifications from the bank, confirmations of transactions, overdue reminders. Each one was like a stab in the gut. They hadn't even bothered to hide it well. Then I pulled up the app I had built years ago to track every cent I'd ever given them. Line after line of contributions. $300 for groceries, $2,000 for car repairs, $5,000 for the mortgage. My records didn't just show generosity, they proved a pattern. I wasn't just a daughter helping out. I'd been their personal safety net, their silent provider while they gambled with my future. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. But under that anger was something sharper, focus. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer in Albuquerque, Carla Martinez. Her office was small, tucked above a coffee shop, but her reputation was solid. She specialized in financial fraud, and from the moment I laid the stack of documents on her desk, I could see her expression harden. "This is identity theft," she said firmly after skimming through the papers. "They used your credit without consent. That's not just wrong, it's criminal." Hearing those words out loud hit me harder than I expected. Criminal. My parents. My brother. Carla outlined the plan. We'd file a police report, freeze the fraudulent account, and build a civil case for damages. It wouldn't be quick, and it wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. And for the first time in years, I felt hope flicker inside me. Still, I knew I couldn't do this alone. That night, I met my best friend Denise at a local diner. She'd been my rock since college, the kind of friend who listened without judgment and told you the truth even when it stung. We sat in a booth with greasy fries between us, and I spilled everything: the dinner, the insult, Grandpa's confession, the loan. Denise didn't flinch. She just listened, her eyes steady, her jaw tight. Finally, she said, "You can't let them get away with this, Bailey. They're counting on you staying quiet." "Don't give them that power." Her words steadied me. Over the next week, Denise came to my apartment night after night. Together, we organized every piece of evidence, labeled folders, timelines, spreadsheets. She helped me stay focused when the weight of betrayal threatened to crush me. Every time I faltered, she reminded me why I was doing this, not just for the money, but for my future, for my right to finally live free of their control. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Signatures forged on loan applications. Transfers directly from the loan account into Ryan's company account. Payments clearly made on his behalf, but tied to my credit. They hadn't just borrowed in my name. They'd built Ryan's empire on my back, and they thought I'd never notice. By the time Denise and I stacked the final folder into a locked box, I felt different, stronger, harder. The Bailey who used to hand over her paycheck without question was gone. Now I had a case. I had evidence. I had allies. And most importantly, I had a plan. It didn't take long for my family to realize something was wrong. A week after the birthday dinner, the phone calls started. At first, it was subtle mom checking in with an unusually soft voice, dad sending a "how are you" text. But beneath their sudden concern, I could hear the panic. They knew I was pulling away. They just didn't know why. The mask slipped fast. One afternoon, while I was at my desk reviewing code, my phone buzzed. Dad's name lit up the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice came sharp and heavy. "Bailey, what are you doing?" "You're tearing this family apart." I sat there stunned. Not a word about the loan, not an apology. Just accusation like I was the villain. He pressed on, his tone dripping with guilt. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Suing your own family. Drop this nonsense before it goes too far. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. After everything they've done for me, the words rang in my head like an insult. They hadn't done things for me, they'd taken from me, over and over. I ended the call without replying, my heart hammering. The next move came from Mom. She showed up at my apartment unannounced 2 days later. I opened the door to see her standing there, eyes red, clutching a tissue like she'd rehearsed the scene. "Bailey," she sobbed, stepping inside before I could stop her. "Family is everything. We made a mistake, but suing us? How could you do this to your own parents?" Her tears fell fast, her voice trembling, but I saw through it. These weren't tears of regret. They were tears of manipulation. I'd spent my whole life swallowing their guilt trips, bending under their words. Not this time. I stayed cold. "You didn't make a mistake, Mom. You stole from me." Her face hardened for a split second before she forced the tears again. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. She left eventually, but not before throwing one last dagger over her shoulder. "You'll regret this, Bailey." The words stung, but only for a moment, then they fueled me. The final act of their desperation came from Ryan. It was a rainy evening when my doorbell rang. Denise was with me, sorting through documents, when I opened the door and saw him standing there. His usual swagger was gone. His hair was damp, his shoulders slumped, and for the first time in years he didn't look like the golden child. He looked desperate.
"My company's gone," he admitted, his voice low. "Bankruptcy's official. I messed up, okay?"
"But please don't go through with this lawsuit. I'll pay you back somehow." I almost laughed. Pay me back? The same brother who had mocked me at dinner, who had soaked up thousands of dollars of my money, who had built his fake empire on a stolen loan in my name. I met his eyes, steady and cold. "You don't get to fix this with words." He shifted, his voice cracking. "Bailey, I'm begging you, please, don't ruin me." For a moment I let the silence hang between us. Then I pulled out my phone, typed 3 words, and showed him the screen before hitting send. No more bread. The color drained from his face. I closed the door on him that night, his voice muffled through the wood as he kept pleading, but I didn't open it again. They'd spent years making me feel small, weak, invisible. Now they were the ones scrambling, and I was the one holding all the power. And for once, I wasn't giving in. The courthouse in Albuquerque was colder than I expected. The kind of cold that sinks into your bones, not from the air conditioning, but from the weight of what's about to happen. I walked in clutching a folder stuffed with weeks of preparation bank statements, emails, my app's transaction logs, proof of everything. Beside me was Carla Martinez, my lawyer, steady and confident. Behind me, Denise slipped into the gallery, giving me a small nod. Across the room sat my family. Dad's jaw was clenched tight, his eyes fixed anywhere but on me. Mom stared down at her hands, her face pale. Ryan slouched in his chair, shoulders heavy, the smug arrogance I'd grown up with nowhere to be found. For the first time in my life, they looked small. The judge called the case, and just like that, it was real. Carla started with precision, her voice calm but cutting. She presented the evidence one piece at a time, emails confirming the loan application in my name, payment reminders I'd never seen, transfers directly from the loan account into Ryan's company. She projected my budgeting app's transaction logs onto a screen, each line showing another sacrifice I'd made. Thousands for bills, hundreds for emergencies, years of financial support. "This is not a child refusing to help her family," Carla said firmly. "This is a young woman whose identity and credit were stolen to fund her brother's failing business. What you see here is not generosity, it is exploitation," I testified next. My voice shook at first, but as I spoke it grew steadier. I told the court about the dinner, about Ryan's cruel words, about Grandpa pulling me aside to confess what he'd overheard. I described the nights I'd stayed up coding, working, saving only to discover that while I was building a future, my family was quietly stealing it. "They called me useless," I said, my eyes on the judge. "But they had no problem using me. No problem signing my name to a $50,000 loan. No problem letting me carry the weight of their choices. The room was silent when I finished. Even the clerk stopped typing for a moment. Then came their turn. My parents' lawyer tried to spin it as desperation. Times were hard, they argued. The parents were just trying to help their son succeed, and they believed Bailey, being part of the family, would eventually understand. It wasn't theft, they claimed, it was survival. But Carla cut through it like glass. Desperation does not excuse fraud, she shot back. If Bailey's parents truly believed she would help willingly, why did they forge her signature? Why did they hide every document, every email, every payment? Why did they stay silent until they were caught? Ryan was called to the stand. For the first time, his charm failed him. He stammered, sweated, tried to dodge responsibility, but the paper trail pinned him down. When Carla showed the transfer from the fraudulent loan directly into his company's account, he went silent. The judge's face was unreadable throughout, but I could feel the shift in the room. The truth was undeniable. Finally, after hours that felt like days, the judge delivered the verdict. The loan was declared fraudulent. My name was removed entirely, freeing me from the crushing debt. My parents and Ryan were ordered to assume full responsibility for the remaining balance. On top of that, the court awarded me $15,000 in damages, not the full amount I'd lost over the years, but enough to mark accountability, and Ryan's company officially dissolved. Its assets seized to cover creditors. The empire he'd built on my stolen credit crumbled in front of him, reduced to nothing more than a bankruptcy filing. The sound of the gavel echoed through the room, sharp and final. I should have felt triumphant, and in a way I did. I'd won. The years of being overlooked, dismissed, used, they ended right there. But as I glanced at my family, the victory felt heavy. Mom tried to meet my eyes, tears glistening, but I looked away. Dad sat stiff, his pride shattered. Ryan just slouched deeper, defeated, the golden child tarnished. When the judge dismissed us, Carla squeezed my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. I stood, gathered my folder, and walked out without a word to the people who once called themselves my family. Mom reached for me, Ryan called my name, Dad stayed silent, but I kept walking. I didn't look back. Outside, the sun was blinding. I stepped into it feeling lighter, even as the ache in my chest reminded me that revenge isn't clean. It costs something. But for the first time, I wasn't the one paying the bill. That was them. The weeks after the court ruling felt strangely quiet. For years, my phone had buzzed with family demands, pleas for money, guilt trips, last-minute emergencies. Now, there was nothing. No calls, no texts, just silence. But words still reached me. Through a former neighbor, I learned my parents had fallen behind on their mortgage. With legal fees, credit card bills, and the $15,000 they owed me, the house I'd grown up in slipped through their fingers. Foreclosure notices piled up, and eventually they were forced into a cramped rental on the outskirts of Albuquerque. Ryan didn't fare any better. His so-called empire dissolved in bankruptcy court, his leased car repossessed, his fancy office shut down. The entrepreneur life he'd flaunted online vanished overnight. The golden child who once mocked me at a dinner table now rang up customers as a retail clerk at an electronics store. I thought I'd feel pure satisfaction hearing it all. And part of me did, but mostly it was a quiet acknowledgement. They weren't untouchable. Their choices had finally caught up with them. Meanwhile, my life moved in the opposite direction. At the startup, my hard work didn't go unnoticed. A few months later, I was promoted to lead programmer, my salary bumping up to $80,000 a year. With that raise, I left behind my tiny shared apartment and moved into a sleek new place downtown. Hardwood floors, a balcony overlooking the Sandia Mountains, and a kitchen that didn't feel like it was held together with duct tape. For the first time, every corner of the space was mine, earned, untouched by their hands. Denise helped me settle in. We ordered takeout, drank cheap wine on the balcony, and toasted to survival. "You did it," she said, clinking her glass against mine. And she was right, I had. But late at night, staring out over the city lights, a pang of loneliness sometimes crept in. I'd won my freedom, but at the cost of family ties I once thought were unbreakable. The silence was louder than I expected. Over coffee one afternoon, an old college friend asked me a question I'd been avoiding. Was it worth it, Bailey? Cutting them off like that? I sat there, tracing the rim of my mug. The answer wasn't simple. The lawsuit gave me justice, but it also forced me to accept something brutal. My family never saw me as an equal. I wasn't a daughter or a sister to them, I was a resource. A tool, a wallet, and once I stopped being useful, they turned on me. That realization hurt more than anything, but it also freed me. Looking back, I realized the lesson wasn't just about betrayal, it was about boundaries. For years, I gave and gave, hoping one day they'd finally see me. Instead, they took advantage of my silence. By fighting back, I wasn't just reclaiming money or credit. I was reclaiming my life. Now, when I think of Ryan's insult, "You can't even afford a piece of bread," I almost laugh. Because he was right, back then. I couldn't, but now, I can buy the whole bakery. And the difference is, I don't owe anyone a single crumb. My family thought I'd always be their safety net, the quiet one who gave without question. But when they crossed the line and stole from me, I proved I was stronger than they ever imagined. I didn't just take back my future, I made sure they paid for every lie, every insult, every dollar. Revenge doesn't erase the scars, but it gives you back control. So if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or used, remember this: you have the power to fight back. Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.